That's better. No, welcome to this workshop, yes. Workshop of the Conservation Reform Commission. We'll hand over to Max, lead this discussion, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Shana's been doing the bulk of the work on this, but yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk through the conservation reform with Council and look to construct a submission to make sure that we have our say in this process. So effectively, the conservation reform is pretty important for us in Southland. So roughly over 50% of Southland's region is conservation or Crown land managed by Conservation Department. So we've got 3 national parks. So there's this tiny slither of Mount Aspiring National Park that sits in the Southland region. There's also a whole lot of stewardship land and marginal strips and other bits and pieces that are all part of the Crown land managed by the estate. So it's pretty important that we have a look at it and understand the impacts around what it looks like for us moving forward. So effectively, there's changes to the Conservation Act through a Conservation Amendment Bill, and there's a National Conservation Policy Statement proposed as well. And then later on this afternoon, we're going to talk about a Wallaby submission as well. So we've got on today to work through, but effectively working through these in the next steps and how it impacts the region. So effectively, why is the reform happening now? Currently, the system is seen as slow and complex. So the move is to modernise conservation management, reduce the red tape, grow tourism and economic activity, and generate more income from those activities to assist with the conservation work. So I'm happy for questions and comments as we work our way through. So anything that's top of mind, jump in. And
is it slow and complex? Or is it just seen as slow and complex?
There's definitely quite a bit slower. There's no timeframes for decisions for concessions. So concessions, there has been a huge backlog in the past as they've worked through those processes, but ultimately too, there's no rights of appeal on merits with concessions. It's more points of law. So the scope for appeals is a bit narrower for the concessions process than a resource consent process. But because they're not bound to 20 working days to get the concessions out, there's some slowness there. But the main drivers for the change is to make sure that how can we get the easy stuff through quicker, and how do you get pre-approvals, and then where do you really need to focus your energy on the consenting side of things, and I guess rebalancing the conservation rights and economic value is sort of that sort of a little bit of a shift towards more economic activities rather than a pure conservation lens, and then economic use of Crown estate through DOC is a particular matter. So sort of elevating that consideration more and provide some better opportunities. Into the next slide. So why should Southland care? So talked about that already. About 50% of the land in Southland is conservation estate. Large national parks. Tourism contributes to the regional economy. So current information indicates there's roughly about 800,000 tourists visit Milford every year. Before COVID, it was just under 1 million, I think it was. So it's nearly returned to the pre-COVID volumes of tourism. But not, it's also there's tourism elsewhere other than Milford as well, around the other parts of Murihiku Southland that also generate income and revenue as well. And then there's still some significant tensions around iconic locations and the pressure of tourism on those places. So Milford Opportunities is one of those aspects that's been considered the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So trying to understand what implications that conservation reform could have on that Milford Opportunities process, and utilising Milford in a better space moving forward.
So all those green areas are conservation areas as well, is that right?
Correct. Just different classifications. So the darker green looks like the Ear Mountains Conservation Estate. The light green is different stewardship land, and then the yellow is the national park process. So the Conservation Act bill, effectively, the amendment bill applies to the land.
Yeah.
Doesn't apply to the coastal waters, but it applies to the inland waters. So the freshwater lakes around Fiordland and Manapuri and Jerry, Karoka and Monowai are all included in the conservation estate. But largely the marine navigational areas of the sounds are excluded from the bill.
And basic dock look after.
Correct. Yeah.
And the grey areas scattered throughout it are also conservation estate, stewardship, also another classification.
Yeah. The academias are in that grey area.
Right.
And maybe a little bit around Waituna down the bottom there as well. Hard to see.
And along many of the river corridors.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty important. Because mountains to fee approach. A lot of our mountains are all conservation estate, alpine environments, and then lots of areas around the coast are also conservation estate as well.
So do all our headwater start conservation sediments?
Yes, I think they do.
Somebody knows better than me. I'm
Yep.
hoping that they probably do.
Certainly for the four main rivers.
All main rivers, it's all start there, so. Okay, good.
Next one. So what's the potential impact on council operations? So effectively, because the nature of our activities, we have impacts on the Crown estate as well. So effectively, work that we do in the catchment biodiversity and pest management space is all influenced by what happens on the conservation land. And tourism is important for regional well-being. And council's position on Indigenous biodiversity and ecosystem health must remain a primary priority on the conservation estate. So there's significant crossovers with our statutory functions under the Resource Management Act, Local Government Act, with the Conservation Act, and there is areas where there is sort of a duplicative process under the RMA, particularly with TAs, but also with regional councils, for example. Wastewater discharges at a new hut on the Milford Track potentially would be covered under the water and land plan, as well as the conservation process. So sometimes you get a duplicate function, or if there's a mining activity on Crown Estate that isn't national park, then there would be the watering, dewatering components would also trigger resource management components. And also thinking ahead to, and it's not entirely clear in the legislation, but the impact of the regional spatial planning requirements and how that intercepts or links in with future plans and plan development in the conservation estate. It's not entirely clear exactly to what extent that conservation approach will be incorporated into the regional spatial plan. It's something that I think should be included, given the tourism and the network infrastructure associated with tourism. We're not sure exactly yet. That legislation comes out, national direction comes out of that process. So I'll hand over to Shana now to work through the next parts of the slide deck. Also, Haley just indicated too, there's a whole lot of science equipment and monitoring data sites on the Crown Estate too, in terms of our statutory function, our role of managing the networks, our flow control, monitoring equipment, rain gauges, and all of those sorts of activities also occur on the conservation estate, and need concessions to be established in those areas as well. So that's important context for councillors.
Yeah, so you may have seen this infographic before. It is quite an engaging overview of the proposed changes contained within the Conservation Amendment Bill. So as you can see, the proposed reform covers a range of areas, from broader system level changes affecting the purpose of the system, the planning system, to more specific topics such as visitor amenity areas and land exchange and disposal. We will be exploring each of those aspects in turn in the following discussion. At a broader scale, several consistent themes emerge. There is greater ministerial discretion, more centralized decision making, and increased flexibility for development and commercial activity. Again, highlighting the shift from pure focus on conservation to enabling economic development within conservation areas. And these themes are consistent with what we have been seeing across different areas of reform, including resource management reform. So there has been a strong emphasis on streamlining regulatory systems, reducing barriers to investment and use, and aligning environmental management with economic objectives. In the conservation context, this is particularly significant as this significantly varies from the current approach of focusing on conservation of the areas.
One might flippantly ask, is these consistent themes for this Conservation Act or for the entire duration of this government? I won't ask that question.
So let us jump into the first topic, being greater development and economic focus. So as briefly mentioned, the change of a change of the purpose is being proposed, and that is supposed to occur through a number of mechanisms. One of that is adding a function to the Department of Conservation's listed function within the Act. So currently there are 8 functions, and there is going to be one additional function. I have extracted this for your information. So that is the extract of the wording used in the bill. So to recognize the economic opportunities and to enable this use and development to the greatest extent practicable under this Act and other enactments. So we've had some discussion about exactly what that phrase greatest extent practicable may mean, but yeah, it's not very clear. So we might have to leave that to the court in future. And also there are within the conservation planning hierarchy, there are policies and plans, and for those plans and policies, it is being outlined in the bill that one of the 2 purposes is to enable economic development. So what that might mean in practice is, again, the significant shift in an overall approach, and that impact could be felt across all the conservation areas that were marked in the map that we have seen before. And with this information, we would like to explore this question with you. To what extent do you consider this rebalancing is desirable or acceptable, and where do you think the balance should sit?
So tell me about the way that any economic fund would be looked at. Is there some criteria that they've got down if you were going to get some rare earth minerals from a particular area? What hurdles you'd have to go through to get that, for instance?
Currently, they use fast track for that sort of code of activities. For the current process, they're using the fast track side of things. That being that one-stop shop where you get regional council consents, GA consents, concessions, heritage, wildlife approvals. Effectively bundles it all into one process, and I think because it's a more significant project, there's 5 or 6 different things that have got risk for decision making. So try and bunch those together at the moment. Moving forward, it's expected that approach would likely continue. But in terms of weighing up the economic benefit of a proposal versus the conservation value, it's not entirely clear as to. It seems that there's a reprioritisation of economics that overtakes conservation values, but it's not entirely clear exactly how that criteria will get
Yeah, 'cause
Around
at the
it.
moment, it's just a blanket no, because it's conservation land, so it can happen, is that right?
In national park, there's sort of different grades. National parks are hard no on everything, whereas more sort of lower grade, lower biodiversity. Yeah, it's a lower status, and therefore there's avenues to establish mining activities or different activities on those areas.
And then there's not just mining and there's tourism things. And I think I saw somewhere in here that they're looking at cutting the cost of doing things in parks and through this in half, is it 40% of what it currently is? I think it's on one of those slides, next one more maybe. There was a cut, and it would be less income for DOC, but it would be quicker and more certain for always. That's sort of what they're talking about.
Yeah, trying to get the easy stuff through quick and easy.
Yeah.
Like, for example, presenting the news on conservation estate, technically that's a thing that would need a concession under the current regime, but they're basically saying, well, if you're showing up and filming somewhere, then you should be able to do that without needing any approvals. So trying to make that super easy. And then there's a second tranche, which is pre-approval. It's pretty much a go for it. With the caveats around it, and there's the more risky stuff. Like mining minerals is you still need to go through a robust process. So sort of 3 tranches of work. But I get the questions around, do you want to see the rebalancing being more commercially focused away from the conservation status, or do you think it should sort of stay where it roughly is? So the question, frame up for our submission.
I would almost suggest that if you look at why we exist, our mission statement, a big part of it is to improve Southland's environment. And I'm just not kind of picking up a vibe that this is about environmental improvement. That shift seems to be pushing the other way, where it could potentially diminish or erode environmental outcomes and environmental values. And I guess the reason that remains a concern for me, because in our most pristine areas, the national park areas, the reason they are valued nationally and internationally is because they are untouched, or largely untouched, or are more pristine than your other standard areas. Of course, if you allow economic development or activities, that kind of drags that value down, I would have thought. It devalues those unique environments. I mean, so personally, I'm struggling to reconcile the shift that's being advocated under this act. I might be missing something, or I might be coming at it as a simpleton.
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, my observation is that this represents a fairly fundamental shift, I guess, in the statutory purpose of the conservation law, and a move towards a more enabling model, and it results in an ambiguity where we're not clear that there's explicit conservation considerations that remain. That said, I do think that there's merit in being open to the department having greater discretion to consider economic opportunities in the conservation estate, but I guess I would caveat that with a desire to see that the conservation outcomes persist and have to be demonstrated for that to go ahead. I don't think we should necessarily write off the opportunities that might exist there, but I think as a nation we want to see those conservation outcomes protected in those spaces.
I would agree to Roger's sort of last statements there. I don't think you want to shut a door completely, because at the end of the day, I mean, from a DOC perspective, the environmental side of things is hugely important. Then again, they're trying to say, well, how do we protect, how do we fund these, the issues with DOC land? And us as a community are saying, being good neighbours, and we peace and all that, but they're saying never have any money. Now, if they can find a benefit in an environmental way of development in their conservation land, you have to have that discussion. It's untapped as such, but then again, where it has to be the criteria to go through it would be very strict, I'd say, to Phil's point of view. But I'd be saying yes, but that's what I'm sort of saying, that you at these points where you could have no, it's like anything, you could have no development on Dockland, you have no farming, you could have nothing and you have everything perfect. Then nobody would be living in it because of the economic situations. So there's a wee balance. I'm not saying opening up and clearing all the bush and Fjordland or anything like that, but there would be economic gains within, if that money's going back in to preserve those areas where have the funding that they need. So I'm just trying to get that balance. So if it makes sense.
I guess I'm open to the discussion. I don't know what protections you have in place, but it seems crazy to me that we complain in New Zealand that people go overseas because they want a better life, to earn more money, whatever. When they go to the West Island, Australia, what does it do? It mines. That's where the bulk of their income comes from. And for us not to open the door on maybe some rare earth minerals and have some caveats around how we use it seems crazy if we're losing all your young people because they want to earn more income in Australia. So I think you've got to be open to it. But yeah, and then I've also come across people that have said, I love the drive to Milford, and they go, should have never been open, we should have kept it shut. And that for those things about opening up areas, maybe a little bit more the filming thing, maybe some more tourism, it makes people appreciate what we've got. So there's a balance there as well. The last thing we want is 10 million tourists going to Milford, because it's not the experience we want. So yeah. But I think you've got to be open to, and I guess it's the way that you look after the values in if you could mine some of those rare earth minerals that are worth a lot, that would add to our economic in a way that wouldn't detract. I'm not talking about mining the whole thing. I think it has to be a balanced way, but you shouldn't shut the door to that, because in time that'll happen anyway.
I'm quite okay with making easy things easy, because that distracts people from doing the more valuable work. But a couple of points I would make. This makes me really uncomfortable. It's a fundamental change to the purpose of the Conservation Act. I would be reluctant to add yet another function to DOC unless they were appropriately funded to implement that function, because they don't have enough now. The other thing I'll just chuck in there, two things actually. If you think about Milford Opportunities, there are some proposals there that are going to need it to be more streamlined and more efficient to implement the infrastructure that they see as necessary, whether it's, bus, shuttle buses or whatever. There's going to be some infrastructure requirements, and so I get that might need to be easy is not quite the right word, but more efficient or something, to enable actually the preservation of the greater estate, right? But the other thing that we must not forget is that those conservation estates are huge carbon sinks. And if we start mucking around with reducing their impact, we're going to have to redress that loss in other ways. So I would be really uncomfortable. That extra function is undefined and wishy-washy and unhelpful. They're not funded for anywhere near the work that they do already. And I would be horrified if we allowed the likes of mining or whatever in some of those pristine environments. A part of me actually, part of me doesn't really mind whether nobody sees our beautiful thing, because then it stays a beautiful thing. Tree falls in the forest. And I look at some of the examples overseas. Melbourne, for example, digress a little bit, but also to my point. Melbourne's water quality, Melbourne City's water quality is some of the best in the world. And it is only because they have not allowed any kind of development in the headwaters of their source water. And they've got several lakes that are, all they've done is put some pipes in very carefully. But there's no development, no human intervention really near those lakes. They've preserved that conservation estate of theirs so that they've got clean water to fuel their city. So just chucking that in there is a consideration for the greater good.
Can I ask a question, and it links to the idea of balance? Natural capital accounting, is there a robust mechanism that would be used in this case to calculate, we will exchange this piece of land, the natural capital outcome is not compromised overall, or we will allow this activity because it's low impact activity in a national park, the natural capital outcome, we are not drawing down the natural capital inherent in the system. Visitor amenity areas. In what way would that, what's the effect of that on our natural? So the question is largely the natural capital accounting system that seems necessary to support these decisions. And I don't know, I'm assuming it's underdeveloped or not a very sophisticated system. Or we think it's not going to do too much. If it's relying on decisions made in Wellington by ministers, and which probably links to the other thing, I would suggest that to preserve balance, there needs to be some local regional input to balance ministerial direction from Wellington. There's a question and a statement on that, sorry.
Yeah, sounds good. So what I'm hearing is that not opposed to economic development, provided it doesn't undermine conservation values, and there's weighing up. It's not a economic over conservation or a conservation over economic, but potentially more of these things. There is value there, but we need to make sure that we're not undermining the intent of the land it was held for.
Could you actually, just throw it out there, could you actually say that if you're doing it, it is for it sounds silly, but for it to be investing back into the conservation, that you're using that. It's not like to go out to a corporate to fund, like if a mining company come in and said, oh, we'll go underground and we'll mine it. We'll take profits overseas or whatever, but actually if it's a government thing, that the funding, if the value or whatever it comes, but it's actually the purpose of it is to fund the operations, enhancing the existing other conservation.
Yeah, so
to put in another criteria, it's not just for put into the general kit. It's actually there's a reason for it to fund. It's going back into the same ecosystem, so to speak.
Yeah, funding wider biodiversity rather than a slush fund of government spending. And
I mean, if you want to, but the reason it's not just saying
Similar to the
roads.
Similar to the cruise ship fee, right? If you're paying to develop there, then that money's got to be used.
And if you don't want to abuse the situation, like Chrisanne, we still want, if you need money to run that place, well, if there's opportunities within your own thing, well, that must make economic sense to.
I guess
sell
the big danger is those, not necessarily the big, fieldland, the little bits that might be nibbled at, depending on your map, the grey and the light yellow, and those ones are the ones that will probably be in the most danger because they can be nibbled away at, and all of a sudden they're gone. So I think we'd have to be really careful if we were saying yes, okay, some economic development's okay. I don't know, we'd have to be really careful that we weren't just going to consume all of that and it was.
What I heard in that conversation is that we would be open to considering it if it was consistent with achieving conservation outcomes.
Yeah.
And there's a risk that the way that some elements of this are constructed, that it locks in long-term, and precludes long-term land use. It locks in long-term concessions, long-term land use, and precludes future opportunities, or makes those takes some options off the table in the future for those landscapes.
And even within that, I'm just asking myself the question: is conservation outcomes or values, is that the right term, or is it natural capital outcomes and values? Because conservation does carry a bit of a colonial kind of notion of we'll know better, we'll lock it up so no one can use it, whereas there could be cultural value derived from use of natural resources or natural capital that doesn't draw down that capital in the process.
There's been a number of examples in the past, 15, 20 years where tunnels through the Olive, under the root burn to get people to Milford quicker, gondolas, half Polyford Road. These are all examples of things that are out there that have, had a huge amount of public debate, and the rigour of the current Conservation Act, has landed where it's landed us today. In future, those things could rear their heads again, and through this lens and what they're proposing, these amendments would create an easier path to say the actual net economic benefit of this activity or this development or this thing, therefore gets through the gate.
And that also goes back to Phil's point about the ministerial influence. The danger with some of those resurfacing or new things coming up is perhaps, and I'm not sure, the lack of public consultation and the lack of local input into some of those decisions that may come out of some of these changes, because the minister could just say, oh no, you can do that, you'll be all right. So that would be a danger we would need to be alive to.
There would be greater reassurance if it was evident that this is the calculations that will be consistently applied to evaluate the natural capital outcome.
So rigorous process.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a land exchange being considered, it might seem sensible, but you'd want to understand when we're doing it in the Northland or Taranaki or Westland or Southland, we're going to be using a standard set of natural capital calculations to make sure that we're not giving away natural capital in the process. That the natural capital, the net outcome, is not compromised.
That is one occasion when a nationally applied tool would be helpful.
And I know that these are emerging things and they're contested, but I would have thought at no point in human history have we been in a better position to attempt a natural capital accounting system that might be applied to these kind of questions. Maybe we don't get it right the first time around, but at least we've got something as a starting point. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, what I'd see with it is that you would define what the activity is, and you're not talking about you start at one point and just go wherever. So you'd have to define what you're looking to achieve and what you're going to have at the end of it. The economic benefit may be huge, and in time it might end up like when you put the second tail race tunnel through, you took out quite a bit of native bush, they cleared it, they put the tunnel in, and it reverted very shortly back. So had you not been able to declare that, you wouldn't have done it, which derived quite a lot of benefit from the extra generation that you could have at Manapuri, for instance. So, you know, absolutely, sometimes you just got to enable that stuff. But it should be about that the event isn't going to be like maybe the worst corporates in third world countries where they go and integrate the whole thing. It's not what we're talking about. But maybe it's hard to define exactly what that is until you actually get a proposal, but you have some checks and balances in there to make sure that it doesn't breach the overall conservation values and head us into something that we weren't expecting. So, yeah.
To Phil's earlier point, you know, that this is consistent with some of the other layers of reform that we've seen, where there's a move to centralised decision making, and certainly, you know, removes an element of that local voice. You've got illustrated up there, but I guess also there's a risk that there's a lot of there's not necessarily consistency maintained in the approach, because, and you know, and if we look back in the last 5 or 6 years, I think we've had 5 different ministers of conservation over that period of time. It's a portfolio that's changed very regularly. So, yeah, you know, by centralising power in that minister, you know, and accepting that portfolio seems to change regularly, there's a real risk that we don't have a consistent approach to decision making around conservation land.
And even less confidence with a Ministry for the Environment rolled into a monster MSIT ministry, which arguably diminishes the representation of standalone environmental issues. I may be wishful thinking when I speak of a natural capital accounting system as a way to make comparative analysis of economic value versus natural capital value.
Yeah, there is, through you, there is a scheme of biodiversity credits that has been used quite a bit through consenting. It was used extensively in the Denniston Plateau, the mining approach up there. So effectively trying to do accounting of, this is the biodiversity credits that exist pre-mining. How do we pick that up, transport that somewhere else, and allow for the credits to exist in another location where we undertake the mining activity where it once was, and counting apples with apples and trying to understand how many lizards there were and shrubs and trees, and then what's the lag time between what current natural state is to future natural state is, a 30-year time frame of recovery, and how much do you need to build in. Those systems do exist, but they're highly technical and highly administrative to get the accuracy in the process. So there is examples of that existing in its current state, which could be transferred to this new system. So that's a good suggestion. We'll move on to the next slide, I think. So this slide that Shana's put up indicates the current process on the left-hand side around the policy settings for conservation estate. So currently you've got the Act at the top, you've got general conservation policies for the national parks and general policies. They're approved by the minister and the regulations. There's another conservation management strategy before you get into the more localised plans for national parks and conservation estate. The proposed new system on the right-hand side indicates that we're combining the conservation management strategies into the plans, so you effectively get your national policy statements and you get an area plan. So they're removing a layer of planning between the top level and the next level.
Who prepares the area plans in this framework?
It's gonna be the Department of Conservation, according to the process consultation and other process set out in the bill. So there are 2 types of consultation: long consultation and standard consultation and short process. So they outline who will be consulted and over what period of time.
It's probably worthwhile noting clearly the role of conservation boards moving forward in this space. Bit less involvement through conservation boards around that local say, which occurs currently. It's more, you know, prepared by the Ministry or Department of Conservation, and then potentially there would be consultation, I presume, and then up through a minister for approval. Less accounts and more checks and balances, or less local settings determined by local representatives who have got, you know, connections to place or, knowledge of the
Well,
existing situation.
Much more mana whenua involvement in those conservation boards.
So you're saying, are you suggesting that the influence of conservation boards will be diminished?
Yes.
Currently, the Conservation Authority approves the strategy and the conservation boards approve the plans. That is changing. The proposal is that they change to providing comments on the policy and the plan, with the minister making the final decision.
On area plans?
Yes, area plans included. And one other thing I would like to share with you for your information about the change from the current to the new system is that for ease of reference, NCPS, the policy statement, is going to be quite a top-heavy document that outlines a lot of details about what should go into the area plans. And it is proposed that no limits are specified in the area plans for the various activities that may happen in the state. Meaning that with area plans presumably being developed with more community input, with even those affect regions, the intention seems to be there should be national consistency with the limits that apply to the various activities. And given the way this conversation is going, I might just pull out some information from the next slide and kind of share with you just at the same time. So with the new approach is that the CPS is going to be quite detailed. In the next slides on the concession system, we were going to discuss the new types of activities, categories of activity that are being introduced, which are exempt and pre-approved and pre-assessed. So exempt, as an example of how NCPS is getting top-heavy, so exempt and pre-approved activities are specifically listed in that document, and the terms and conditions that apply those activities are also outlined in the document. Those terms and conditions are out for public consultation at the same time as this bill. So we are currently going through the various policies in the NCPS to assess their potential impact on the vision and our operations. So that is quite a significant shift in how things are going to be in the new planning hierarchy. So again, that goes to that importance of considering how we can channel regional input into the final decisions, because the terms and conditions will have a determinative effect on how the activities are managed on the ground in the region. So just to briefly touch on and recap, the changes to the building on the discussion on the purpose and the brief discussion on the planning system change, they could mean that this process is simpler, potentially less complex, but there is going to be an element of expanded ministerial discretion, which is quite obvious, and reduction of regional input that happens alongside, and limited ability to impose place-specific controls. And the concern is that this is the change listed here is happening alongside other changes which will be mentioned in the slides to come, which are more about specific tips. And I believe we have covered most of these discussions. And we have already touched on the changes to the concession system reform. So just to touch on these questions, so some of the key questions that we are considering as staff prepare a draft submission, which will be coming to you for review potentially next week. We are thinking about whether there are any activities that should never be pre-approved due to a risk, or whether there are feasible ways of managing cumulative effects of low impact activities. Okay,
There was some examples somewhere, wasn't there?
examples
In the
of the,
documents that were floating around, I thought there were some examples of pre-approved.
yes, pre-approved activities, there are 4 exempt activities.
Yeah.
That includes collection of air or soil samples for research and filming. So those are, relatively low impact, short-term activities. And pre-approved activities are 16 activities. And the other pre-assessed activities are 26. So those, they all have been outlined in the draft NCPS that's out for consultation.
In one of their documents, things like tourism, taking fishing guides and some of that stuff, I thought was might be. There was another slide of this, wasn't
Yes.
this one?
There you are.
That would be worse.
Oops. At the bottom,
Pre-approved, there we go.
you can see examples of the various types of activities.
So the pre-approved ones, where it says up to 40% of concession activities stock estimate, the concession activities come at a cost, did they? Yeah, which means they're giving up 40% to have them pre-approved, doesn't it? So
Yeah, there would still be a cost, I would understand, going through the pre-approval process, but it's a more streamlined version.
Streamlined,
You meet this
yeah.
box,
Yeah.
it's pretty much pre-approved, there's a few caveats and you're in and out pretty quick.
that's right.
Just to add further details to that, there's a distinction between pre-approved and standardized pre-assessed activities. So that what Marcus described can be more applicable to the pre-assessed activities, with pre-approved activities more being similar to how permitted activities are taken in the current resource management system. With that's where my mind has been in the last week or so. So just getting the details off the top of my head. So the various there are quite a lot of detailed terms and conditions in NCPS. They have to be complied with by the people you have with the concessions. Just to go back a little bit. Yeah, the concessions are automatically given to those people if they comply with the conditions. And it is spelled out in the bill that they can be charged for monitoring and compliance in relation to those conditions, but it is up to the department to charge that cost. It is with pre-assessed activities, you do need a concession to engage in those activities. One additional layer that we are not familiar with because it's being introduced is that 5 visitor zones that are shown just above. So those visitor zones are going to be affecting the decision as to where the pre-assessed activities will be allowed. So there is a big table attached to NCPS that distinguish the 5 visitor areas, and also it also incorporates land classification that was developed quite some time ago. So I think there are like 20 types of different land classification, and there are ticks next to each of the 26 activities to show where they are likely to be allowed. So if the applicant comes to the department wanting to undertake an activity in an area that is within visitor amenity area, and also within an area identified as a low risk land classification, recreational area, for example, then it's likely to be permitted, but allowed. However, if not, then there will be more hurdles to go.
Can you just help me understand? Sorry, this is a wee bit detailed, but I just can't get my head around it. The pre-approved concessions, for example, I'm thinking that many of those will be existing operations anyway, although it will open the door for some new ones potentially. How does that fit with our own consents and monitoring for some of those activities? So I'm just thinking of the surface water activities hearing that I sat on, and so, you know, there were things like commercial boats and transports, right? So how does what we're already doing and granting permission for sit with this? Will this take that part of what we do out of it? Or how does that work?
At the moment, it's a duplicate process. Is the Resource Management Act approval,
Yeah.
which we've currently got, and then there's a Department of Conservation concession approval process for the same activity. So, yeah, we're still,
It would still
Still
do
continue.
that.
yeah, there'd still be two pathways that it looks like at the moment, a Resource Management Act or future Resource Management Act process and a concession process. But the concession process would be a lot more streamlined and easy because it's sort of been carved out as a pre-approved activity.
Yeah, got you. Right.
So you still need your
Yeah.
concession process, but it's already a tick box exercise.
Yeah, so when Milford, what are they called now? The boat people and it's terrible, can't remember.
Cruise ship.
Yeah, the tourism, the tourism operators. Yeah, righto.
The question of cumulative effects, and I'm kind of borrowing on what I know from the water space, that you can predict if you do a certain type of activity and a certain amount of it over time, you're probably going to get a negative outcome. And at the moment, we're looking at our waterways and going, we kind of knew this was going to happen. We wish we had more controls in place earlier. Can we anticipate the type of over allocation outcomes associated with these activities and or certain types of activities? Horse riding, like, for example.
Yeah, if you have 5 companies all competing for the same space, the same location, that's where the visitor zones would assist in the direction set in the area plans. Would say effectively this is the carrying capacity of this resource. If it's a reasonably front country area where you expect a lot of interaction with different tourists, then you would expect of a number of different activities to coexist. Whereas as you get more naturalised or more wilderness, then the carrying capacity or the ability to issue concessions would be determined by the area plans as to saying, one operator or no operators, or one operator is allowed 3 days per month in this environment because it's expected that it's a backcountry wilderness environment. You wouldn't likely meet other people regularly in that zone. So the different zones would then classify the carrying capacity of the operations.
And what you've described there is there's limits, there's a form of limit setting within that, what you've just described.
Yeah.
And they come from Wellington and they define the zone and the activities. Because at a regional level or an area plan, there's no limit setting allowed. So it relies on limits being defined from Wellington associated with activities in zones.
Yeah, I presume there would be a little bit of advice from the conservation boards, but they wouldn't be, I guess, making the decisions. It would be saying, our view, these are the areas and here's the lines that we think are appropriate for the different categories of zone. And then that would be put into this is the concessionaires holding concessions in these locations. What's the interaction? Is it too high, too low? Where the settings sit? So I think it would be probably a two-way conversation, but it's very hard to know. The devil is in the detail in that space. So,
and then the next part of that is deconflicting activities that might be considered pre-approved, but I was mentioning maybe drones and horses don't go together in the same location at the same time, for example. I don't know if they do, maybe they don't. Or you may have drone resistant horses who are trained to put up with a humming.
Horse resistant drone?
Drones. I'm just trying to think through how does that deconfliction be managed? Maybe it's a question.
it's a good question. I'm not sure how that would be played out in detail.
Also within that, the exempt activities, right? So if you don't have to get a concession to go and do your filming or your water collection for research, how's that? Is there some plan to monitor that? So, because that could be a cumulative issue as well if you had lots of people needing to collect water for research purposes or whatever. You know, who's tracking that exemption use? How would that be administered?
Yeah, these are great questions, and it's hard to understand. Like, the settings around exempt activities would be at a level that would be able to, you know, if there were 30 people showing up on the same day to collect the sample of water, then
Who's going to do that job? Are they? They're going to stand there and wait for 30 people to.
It says at the bottom, conditions still apply, so I don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. And whose responsibility is it?
and monitoring the system to outcomes as to adverse impacts, and the closing the loop as to cause and effect, and who's keeping an eye on the effects of the rigor of the system.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you need to put in the submission, that, you know, it's great to walk the Central North Island, that Tongariro crossing thing, but if there's 100 people lined up trying to get a toilet at the same time, then that's a really bad outcome. So, you know, it is about the amount of people doing it that attracts, and no one has the experience they're trying to have. So.
Look at Everest, it's a nightmare.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And I guess that's probably picks up on the localism, the local determination, and the people that know the areas and know the visitor experience that you would likely expect in a different location. More localism in the decision making and the plan setting process would be beneficial for good outcomes.
See, that's already coming through on the Morford thing. There's talk of maybe tourists in the future, if they continue to rack up and be on buses and limiting cars. Some of that because of the congestion, and people don't know which side of the road to drive on and all that stuff. So, you know, you have to have something in there to say that if it gets out of hand, that you can pull it, you know, you're going to have some sort of overview of it and make sure it doesn't detract from what everybody's expectation.
I think there might be some advantages in the pre-assessed piece, because at least that's clear. You go into that with your eyes wide open. But there might be some advantages in that, but I haven't fully talked through the disadvantages yet.
The resourcing for monitoring is an important consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have a lot, we've got concerns about their resourcing to deliver on their existing landscape. Yes, Jeremy's raised them, Lyndall's raised them. So, you know, seeking some reassurance that there's an adequate resourcing to do that. It's an overarching consideration.
Because they not struggle to pick up on that and begin with in looking after noxious plants, which is a frustration to landowners that have invasion coming from here.
We would like to provide some more details about the potentially 3 more topics of visitor amenities area and land exchange and disposal, and EV issue impact. We'll try to keep this relatively brief and informative. So in terms of a visitor amenities area, the proposal is that the minister can identify areas that support concentrated visitor infrastructure, and I guess this links to the discussion we've just had about the need to provide infrastructure in tourism high visit areas such as Milford. So for this matter, with the potentially significant impact, it is important to have a robust process for developing and identifying the areas. There is a public consultation outlined in the bill, but it doesn't specify any minimum period. It appears to be relatively weak compared to other consultations in the bill. So staff were thinking of making a point with council approval that this process is ready. And there is a provision for initial consultation with relevant EV groups. With the various consultation processes that have been outlined in the bill, we have noticed that there is no mention of regional councils or local government in general. There appears to be a gap compared to the current system, and given the heightened need to provide regional input, with expanded ministerial discretion, we staff believe that this could be an area we can provide a strong submission on that. Council should be consulted earlier on in the process. Touching on the implications, efficiency can be improved where visitor pressure is high. We have recognized that need, but there is a risk of pest spread and pressure on the surrounding ecosystem, and that includes within the area identified and also outside of the visitor amenities area. Because of the close interconnections between ecosystems, they can have impact on water allocation, quality, and migratory species in the catchment that are located downstream of the headwaters, where the VAAs are likely to be. We would also like to discuss land exchange and exposure in a bit more detail. This is a relatively contentious area in the reform. So as we have briefly touched on, again, the minister has a discretion to make final decisions on these matters. And the test is of net conservation benefit, and this is different from the current test of low or no conservation value. So the test is changing significantly, and that test is for land exchange. Disposals can occur and a different test applies, and it is where there's no impact on threatened species or ecosystems, and to put it simply, and there's the affected ecosystem habitat is not the best example of its type. Conditions can be attached to the exchange or disposal decisions, and as with other processes in the bill, certain groups are invited for comments during the process with the minister still making the final decision. And again, it wasn't really clear whether local government was going to be invited for comments, so we will be submitting on that with your approval. And again, it's been interesting in the discussion with internal subject matters at this council. There was a sense that this change can be helpful in some ways, because currently there are some conservation land that is owned by Department of Conservation for administrative purposes rather than conservation purposes. So those land areas can be used by the community for social and economic benefits. However, on the other hand, there was a concern that the lack of data on our ecosystems can lead to irreversible loss of valuable habitats where they are not sufficiently well identified. And also broad changes in land use from disposal sale of land can lead to challenges that have ongoing impacts due to degradation and loss of ecosystems. And that does link with the current resource management reform, because what can happen on the lands that are no longer a conservation area will depend on the future rules that apply to those areas.
With spatial plan considerations as part of our local government consultation argument, I would think. And I have a question about the net conservation benefit. Is that national applied, or is it regionally applied? So if we chopped off a chunk of Fiordland, does the exchange have to happen within Southland, or is it a nationwide thing? So our loss might be somebody else's gain, if you know what I mean.
So you give it 50 hectares of Fiordland, but in Northland you get another 50 hectares inside for Cowrie.
Yeah.
Expansion or something.
And is that what we would like? We might. I don't know.
I guess I'd like to put in the current process. I'm unaware, but I'm aware that so up near Lumsden on the east bank of the Reading River, we were up there looking at a job once to do with beach protection, And it was back in the days where you had to actually put some money on the table as a lender. And the frustration was that we had the top parcel of land that was quite small on the river, but went away out to a farmer's paddock and stuff, but they didn't want to put any money in the pot at all. And it was landlocked in conservation. It looked like just a part of the paddock. So, you know, the likes of that being tidied up makes sense because very hard to earn income off it. It's not a square paddock. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, makes sense really to have a process where that can be disposed of logically to what's already happening. So, yeah.
This map probably worth displaying on the screen because this was helpfully provided by Forest and Bird recently. And it shows areas. Can you clearly see the color on the screen? So it's not so clear on the big screen, but orange areas indicate where land economic opportunities can be pursued, whereas the darker color, the darker orange on the big screen are the areas where land exchange and disposal can take place. So that's there. There is a list of types of land where exchange and disposal cannot take place. It's in one of the schedules to the bill that includes national parks.
It's important to note, we look down on the eastern side of Waikiwi as well. This dark orange. Should have had a bit more contrasting colour to assist with the visuals on the right. It only came out this morning, I think, for Radio New Zealand and Forest and Bird.
So the concept of exchange and disposal. There's no commentary on the expected ratios on the basis that it could end up being 98% of the land is disposed of and only 2% is exchanged, significantly diminishing the overall conservation areas, or there's no metrics around the ratio of what that could look like. I think it's each one on their merits. Because when you use the term exchange and disposal, it could be weighted in favour of disposal, in which case we're giving away or transferring ownership of public health conservation state in some form. Yeah, I guess it's trying to identify potential. Is there opportunities for ecological areas that have a higher conservation value that are in private ownership that would be better managed as part of the conservation estate? And is there a quid pro quo of actually this bit's got low conservation value, it's owned by the Crown, makes more economic sense to have that in? Is it linked to that net conservation? Yeah.
I'm looking at what I think is Waituna.
Bigger. I think it's the light.
The orange.
I think it's light.
I think there's some of both, to be fair. There's a large part is orange, and then around the Tiwai Peninsula there's some dark as well.
Am I the only one that's mildly concerned about that?
Zoom. But predominantly orange with a couple of red bits.
And
Yeah.
Most of it.
Yeah.
I'll be just for the wallaby conversation.
Last but not least, I think you would be aware that the government had expressed the intention to implement changes to how treaty principles are mentioned in the legislation in a gradual manner. So could be one of the first examples of how that is undertaken. In the Conservation Act, it is known to be contain one of the strongest direction in terms of giving effect to treaty principles, because it's give effect to the principles of the treaty. The change is that the bill specifies how that is to be undertaken when interpreting the act. So in various places, in terms of consultation, their requirements have been outlined. So affected Maori groups have to be consulted in such timing and over such period. So those are spelled out throughout the bill. And this could enhance clarity and consistency from efficiency perspective. On the other hand, the risk is that it could undermine how currently the principles of the treaty are given effect to in the current system in Southland, which is a biodiversity hotspot, and that could have negative consequences for ecosystem and also from iwi perspective in terms of maintaining the partnership with the Crown. So that is flagged as quite a significant concern. We have these questions for your consideration. And during this workshop, we have thank you so much for all the valuable information and insights you have shared with the team, and we will take those away to inform the submission that the team is drafting currently, and share with you for your review potentially early next week, so that you can share further input, and then that can be incorporated into the submission so that it will effectively advocate on behalf of this council and also this region. I can next slide. So again, once that is completed, the submission will be lodged after to the select committee for their consideration. The closing date is the 2nd of July. It's not too far away. As I mentioned before, the consultation on the NCPS is also occurring at the same time. It was due earlier, but that has now been extended to the 10th of August. But in terms of reporting to council, I think we will try to progress that submission at the same time. And that submission is likely to be more technically focused compared to the submission on the bill. So there will be 2 submissions that will be coming your way for your review and feedback. Any suggestions for strengthening the points in the submission will be greatly appreciated. And lastly, because those submissions will be lodged without formal endorsement, we will be coming to the council meeting with a report requesting retrospective approval on the 2nd of July. And then
On to that last set of questions about giving effect to the treaty. I guess the question that emerges for me is, from a Ngāi Tahu perspective, does that diminish or increase their influence over practical conservation outcomes or practical natural capital outcomes? And maybe we can't answer it. Maybe that's for Ngāi Tahu to answer. Whatever their answer is, I think should guide our response, because I would be concerned if it diminished their influence beyond what is currently available, especially if it's coming from national guidance and how to give effect to the treaty rather than regional or place-based guidance, because my understanding is that there is a lot of place-based knowledge that might suggest that it's not a blanket solution or a one-size-fits-all solution. I don't know. I'm speculating here a little bit because I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm nervous that historically the concept of conservation is quite I'll use the term colonial, or lock land up so it can't be utilised. But then also that a centrally defined, prescribed way that we're to give effect to the treaty, as opposed to understanding how that plays out differently in different parts of New Zealand. I'm nervous about that. I guess I'm going to zoom right out and say, if we were encountering this within the first 6 months of this government's tenure, I might be a bit more open to it. Really broadly, at this late third year of their tenure, having seen everything else that's come from this government, I am far more resistant to the broad trends being presented in this proposed legislation. The reason is that we've seen again and again, with respect to the environment, this government seems willing to forego environmental outcomes for the benefits of economic development. And so that makes me really nervous about this legislation coming at this late stage of their tenure. And it seems entirely consistent. Everything we're seeing in this seems entirely consistent with those other broad trends from this government. And council are going to tell if heard before. When it comes to the environment, expect the worst from Wellington with this government. And this, to me, just seems to be a continuation of that trend. I'm not sure if other councils have divergent perspectives. I'm just giving you my perspective.
We do have divergent, I guess. Taking it away from politics, I try and put an apolitical filter over it. But I guess we finished with that point. I guess the point that I'm really concerned about is a way that we operate, that we do retrospective approvals. And I'm not saying, Shana, anything with this is wrong, but I don't like the concept of things put in and then we retrospectively approve it. Is there a rider on when we put it in, that it's still to be approved, and therefore, you finally give it a tick somehow, because we haven't, it's a potential to end up with something that's put in that we didn't like, that becomes a thing, and just saying, if it's retrospective, if some of us haven't seen it, for instance, if it's, I don't know what the situation would be, but I'm trying to understand
Process.
Yeah.
So normally what we do in this sort of instance, we workshop, like such as today.
Yeah,
Then we would draft up
understand.
the submission and we would circulate it internally for
Yeah.
review and feedback.
Yeah.
And then make those changes, and then we would flick it to the chairman to go, due dates tomorrow. We haven't got an opportunity to get it through a council meeting in time, and therefore we would get the chairman to sign it, and then we would go through a formality saying, formally endorse the submission at a later stage. But the circulation and the feedback associated with the draft is circulated within time is the way of teasing out what we've heard in the workshopping space, so that there's a level of comfort and positioning associated.
I guess what you're saying there, Marcus, is that nothing is lodged without at least the chair saying it and signing off on it. Is that what you're saying?
All the council would see it and have the opportunity to feed back on it, and we would take all those pieces and then get it for a final draft.
In some of our submissions, what we've done is we have noted that whilst signed by our chair and workshopped by our council, this has not received a formal decision of the council, and we preserve a position. And then if we come back for the retrospective, you as governors then say, actually, you mischaracterised us for further reflection. We instruct you to amend our submission on these points.
Yeah.
We would then, and yes, I do admit it may be too late, we then do send to wherever that submission is going, depending on what it is for, to correct that position, because we have said in here that whilst signed by the chair, this has not had a decision by the council formally to adopt or endorse this decision. So that way, at the very least, the record is correct.
That's correct.
Although the effect of the change may not have an effect.
There are opportunities.
I mean, ideal process is absolutely to do it the correct way, which is we take a formal complete submission to yourselves, but sadly, often we don't get that.
I understand that.
Time frames imposed.
Is it a time, sorry, I'm just to clarify, is it that the government doesn't give us much time to bang his submission? we need it next week sort of scenario, or is it actually just, I mean,
Oh,
in
where's
a
the time
perfect
being
world,
paid?
it we should never do anything breaches. The council should agree to
I may be
put
corrected
pressure on
by
myself to
those.
read something.
Yeah,
But I mean, it is, it's saying, you know, but I mean, most of the time it is the yearly, you know, you've got it right. But then again, I haven't seen the last formal version.
Yeah.
But this is an unprecedented government in
Yeah.
terms of the amount of reform it's driving within the timeframe it's doing it. So you'd therefore expect it to be a situation where we don't have the luxury of running the full thorough process on everything that we would want to comment on. That's a submission.
it has been my experience in this government and previous role,
I'd say
previous governments, that the timeframes are a lot shorter.
Yeah.
They're also variable.
Mm.
You know, sometimes we get very little time,
Mm.
sometimes we get a long time. This is one of the longer ones. The reform of the Resource Management Act, that was one of the longer ones, but the volume of work was insane.
The issue of retrospective approval is less to do with the process and more to do with the phasing. You know, the timing of our meetings aren't coincidental to the timing of the submission due date. But I do note there is a meeting next week on Wednesday.
You also have standing orders, councillor, about when things are required to
Well,
be with you.
we've got a strategy and policy meeting on the 8th of July.
Yeah.
And we've got the following week, 2 workshops, one of which is.
And the other point, and I guess you do this, but often with submissions in the real life, we used to ask for extension to actually do it the right way. But I guess that doesn't happen with some of these things.
No.
I would just observe that this discussion is more one of understanding the process. I wouldn't want you to take this as lack of confidence that we're going to get a high quality submission, because I think the pattern has shown that there's a lot of confidence in the material produced by the team. So thank you for that in the past, and expect that will be the continuing.
We also engage with stakeholders as well during these submissions too. So, you know, if it's the agricultural sector, we'll go out and speak to the agricultural sector so we can understand the issues, where are the benefits that they see, where are the challenges and costs, for example. We'll engage across the regional sector as well. That does take time. We do use innovative tools to make it really efficient, particularly in the analysis space, AI, to help with kind of short-circuiting our bits of the process.
Which brings me to something I was going to mention before regarding iwi involvement. One would assume that Tammy deep in this, but consulting with them would be so that we are consistent, assuming we agree. And also Te Putai, because at least that's a lot of the south.
We did invite Te Marama to this workshop. They weren't able to make it, unfortunately, but we have reached out and got some feedback from Te Marama board members that have been on the conservation board in Southland as well, such as Estelle Leask, who's provided some comment back as well. So we have been working our way through the process, and we did sit down with Councillor Rodway and Councillor Hodson about with their roles on the conservation board as well, to try and gain that knowledge and understanding as to how does it focus and work in practice. What are the problems that you've had in the past? Does it work well? What's broken with the system, to try and flesh out some of those things that how can we make it better, not just to make it faster or make it economically focused.
Is there potential, maybe in a preamble or introducing our submission, to note that this has the potential to shift something that is actually really close to the identity of most Kiwis, that clean green image that we are known for internationally, or that people believe or have the perception of internationally, links to our willingness to conserve the natural world in the past. And this is potentially shifting that, I would have thought.
Yep.
I'm not sure. But that's again, it makes me really nervous about that. The number one value that is common to most Kiwis is a respect for the environment. And this seems to be prepared to forego that to a degree. Conservation.
was just gonna make one, there's only 5 of us here, so this is a wee bit of concern this week with all these other things. I sort of made that point last week. And even from today, you've got less than half the councillors here. It would be good to be able to put something together. So, and ask for anybody's else in this. Because some are on leave, that's fine, but there is a point to get to a level rather feel comfortable signing things, but I know everybody's actually had to look over it. If there was a good majority, if there's a couple late, so today we're running lean. So, but that's also trying to get time and get the meetings. Well, there's no reason why you got to sign this, we've got to get it away. That it can't get sent around to the councils. To actually read over this, so that you've got a heads up, which is what. So everybody's seen it before it gets sent, and instead of getting back retrospectively.
I might propose with this one to put a draft copy on the S&P agenda for the 8th. With the closing date on the 10th, so at least the fulsome final draft goes up for conversation, although the S&P committee may not be able to endorse it or approve it, but at least
councillors are there.
It's on the table for a fulsome conversation.
And again, I'd like to follow up with those comments. This is nothing personal, it's just a process thing. You know, I get a bit nervous when I'm there. Whoa, this has got the ability to eat it somewhere we don't want to be. So,
good question to ask.
Awesome, thanks for your time. And I think it's a wallaby piece up next.
Very more guns, do we? Shoot the wallabies. Sorry, it's just on. It's on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
thank you.
No worries.
What do you want to? Yeah, if you want to get a 5-minute, or just get a drink of coffee, or you want to
I'm
carry
going to
on?
go at 3.
Do that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that was good.
Yeah. No, we'll get into it again. All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that once we can measure.
Oh, no.
Changed his mind.
Is that all right? All right. Okay.
Thank you. You're going to go.
I want to go about the 3s.
Oh, yes, fair enough.
Yeah,
So I'm on a meeting tonight, and I've got some stuff to go at home, so.
It never stops.
Kia ora koutou. I'm gonna walk you all through the National Wildlife Strategy Review and why it matters for Southland, even though we don't have wallabies. I have with me one of our animal biosecurity officers who's going to help with all the technical questions.
So, can we? Listening, yes, guys.
So the National Wallaby Strategy is being reviewed to reflect the what they've learned over the past 5 years and to set the next phase of management. And as a side note, Tipu Mātoro is the National Wallaby Eradication Program led by Ministry for Primary Industries. So within the session, I'll provide an overview of the review and go through why this matters for us. And we would like your thoughts and feedback on the proposed submission points that we've drafted up using the knowledge and expertise from the animal biosecurity team. Looking to figure 2 is the designated South Island containment area, which is in South Canterbury. These containment areas are used to keep all wallabies contained within, and once that is achieved, the aim is to continue to reduce wallaby numbers inside those containment areas and then shrink the size of those areas over time. While these containment areas have been set, wallabies are already moving beyond them. Figure 3 shows predicted spread into Otago under a status quo scenario. The lighter orange colour represents the predicted spread in 2025, reaching out to what looks like Moeiraki. Keeping wallabies out. So as you'll see in the image from the Otago Regional Council website, despite efforts in Canterbury, wallabies have already spread outside the containment area. The red dots show the locations of dead wallaby in Otago between 2012 to 2025. Once wallabies establish, they're extremely difficult to detect and remove, especially at low numbers. And the longer they go undetected, the more expensive eradication becomes. control costs can increase rapidly and continue long term. So prevention is far more cost effective. We're already seeing in Otago that costs increase as wallaby numbers get lower, not because the program isn't working, but because finding those last few animals is the hardest part. That's why early intervention is critical. It's much more cost effective to stop them spreading now than to deal with long-term control later. The key point is that decisions made through this review will directly affect effort in Otago. If that effort drops, that risk shifts south to us. Also, effective eradication in Otago is the most cost-effective way of protecting Southland before wallabies reach our region. So, what is the next phase for wallaby management? At a high level, the program is moving from a focus on containment into a suppression phase, where decisions need to be made about how effort is prioritised going forward. There are a range of options within the review, but they largely come down to these two key decisions. The first consideration is where effort is focused, whether it continues to prioritise stopping spread at the range edge or shifts more toward reducing numbers within the core populations. The second consideration is the one we're most concerned about, and one we'll come back to in the next slide, is whether to focus on all wallabies or only breeding populations. At the moment, the approach is to try and remove every individual at the range edge. One of the options is to instead focus only on breeding populations and accept that some individual wallabies may remain at low densities. The long-term vision hasn't changed. The goal is still a wallaby-free Aotearoa. And this map shows that parts of Southland are considered good to moderately suitable habitat for wallabies. So the way these decisions in the review are made can impact us. For this slide, I've linked the proposed shifts in approach to the potential consequences from a Southland perspective. At a high level, the concern is that some of these changes could reduce effort on individual wallabies, tolerate low density populations, and shift effort away from areas like Otago. The potential consequence of that is an increased risk of spread, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. From a Southland perspective, wallabies are currently managed as an exclusion pest under our regional pest management plan, which means our goal is to keep them out entirely and respond quickly to any sightings. A key principle that supports that approach is that all sightings matter, and in practice, we treat every wallaby as a potential breeding population until proven otherwise. For example, one of the considerations is to focus on breeding populations rather than every individual. The challenge with that approach is that in practice, we often can't tell whether a wallaby is truly isolated or part of a breeding population. So if effort is reduced on individual animals, there's a real risk that populations establish without being detected. And we know from operational experience that wallabies are difficult to detect and expensive to remove. This image is a good example of wallaby damage. On one side of the fence where wallabies are present, you can see heavy browsing damage, with vegetation significantly reduced. This shows the real environmental and land use impacts once wallabies are established and how difficult that is to reverse. So the key point is that even relatively small changes in how we approach control, like tolerating low numbers or reducing effort at the range edge, can have significant downstream impacts. For Southland, that means a higher risk of spread and the potential for significant long-term environmental and economic costs. These are our proposed submission points. The overall intent is to support a strong national precautionary approach that keeps us on track for eradication, rather than shifting toward long-term control. Firstly, we're recommending that the strategy makes eradication an explicit objective. At the moment, eradication is framed as something we progress toward. We are recommending making it explicit to ensure decisions and investments stay clearly focused on achieving that outcome. We support continuing to eliminate all individual wallabies at the range edge. This is critical to preventing spread, and moving away from this toward only focusing on breeding populations introduces significant risk. Relating to that, we're recommending maintaining a precautionary approach, including investigating all sightings. Because of the difficulty in detecting wallabies and confirming population status, we can't afford to assume that animals are isolated. A key point for us is ensuring that effort in Otago is maintained or strengthened. Otago is effectively the front line for preventing spread into Southland, so any reduction in effort there directly increases our risk. We're also recommending early and sustained investment. While costs increase as numbers get lower, that's a normal part of eradication, not inefficiency. Delaying effort or reducing investment is likely to result in much higher long-term costs. And finally, continuing investment in detection and surveillance tools is critical, so we can find and respond to animals early before the populations establish. And I've put a few questions up here to guide the discussion. Do you support Environment Southland advocating for a strong eradication approach? Are there any concerns about advocating for continued effort in Otago to prevent spread into Southland? Is there anything missing from the submission? Are councillors comfortable with the submission direction?
Obviously we the governments have always talked with Otago and Canterbury. So this is a bit of we haven't got them here, but this is where we should be, to be honest, with some of this, like Māori point, I suppose, that you will put money into Canterbury or wherever it's needed, because it'll end up costing us in the future if we don't.
Oh, for sure.
Invest in it. So it's
Exactly. Like if what's happened in that containment area that you can see on the picture there from the Waikiwi to the Rangitata becomes the piece between the Waikiwi and the Clutha. Southland does not have a chance of stopping them from establishing. There's just too many animals.
Yeah.
So our biosecurity is actually quite dependent on what is happening in North Otago, and we need to keep it there.
So point of clarification around the population, there's always been wallabies around Waimate, I guess.
That's correct.
And so where has it got to and how many animals are we looking at?
Right.
And another question there in North Island.
That's correct. We didn't want to
Same
talk about
wallabies?
no.
No.
Different species, different. You've got different techniques as well, and I've got different biology. There's actually two programs. We've really got two programs, and we need to have two different types of strategies really to deal with them, and also to separate them from the Bennetts.
So what was the original question?
The first one was a little bit about. I think he was getting a little bit about the history and what's happened.
So but you're saying there's two types of what? Of wallabies?
Is there
Well,
North
there's-
Island, one in the South Island?
Yeah, basically we've got in the North Island, you've got Palmer and Dama, two species of wallaby in the North Island up in the Bay of Plenty.
Yeah.
They have quite different behaviours and ecology compared to the Bennetts.
So we've got
right.
Bennetts.
So we've got Bennetts
Yeah,
down
that's
there.
what I'm just.
Sorry.
So we're completely dumb.
Yeah. So we've got the larger, we've got the Bennetts wallaby, and it's from Tasmania. It's a large wallaby. There's 3 of them to a stock unit. So back in probably in the 1950s or so when they started culling them,
When were they introduced?
1870.
Yeah.
Both islands same time.
No, different
Sorry,
time
going
periods
back.
as well. And there was quite a number of other species that were released in the North Island. So with the Bennetts, they were introduced in the Hunter Hills behind Waimate in 1870. It took them quite a while to adapt to our conditions, which were quite different from their home. But over the decades they did, and they did very well. And then they got to a point where they became a significant agricultural pest, and they actually employed cullers from the Internal Affairs to cull them just like the deer. And for a period of time there, they culled about 70,000 and made no dent in the population actually spread. And by that point, by the 1970s, there was probably around 1 million wallabies and 700,000 hectares, and 3 Bennetts to a stock unit.
Yeah.
So you add that up, 1 million wallabies,
So how
3 of
many-
them to a stock unit.
How many have we got now? Like,
Well, in 1972, they got a wallaby board going. In the period between 1972 and 1992, the wallaby board was very, very successful with dropping their numbers and containing them back into the Hunter Hills primarily. And they did a lot of innovative sort of things, and they did a lot of poisoning with 1080 as well, which was highly effective on bennets. And they did a really good job to the point where the numbers were quite low. The amount of money being spent per wallaby was really high. And then in 1992, well, it was about 1990, 1989, the government actually decided to pull the national funding from the program. So it was thrown onto landowners, and it became contentious with some landowners not wanting to subsidise the control of wallabies on other people's land, and the whole thing sort of fell apart. So from 1992, the population was probably around 330,000 hectares of South Canterbury, exploded from that point to 2015 to 900,000 hectares.
So what sort of population have we got currently?
Currently, within the core, it's really intense. So the Hunter Hill area in there, largely, there's a hell of a lot of wallaby in that area. The buffer areas on the south and western side have had substantial control, but still there's significant populations on the northern side of the Waikiwi. And unfortunately, up on the north in the Rangitata, we've had wallabies go across the Rangitata in the last dozen years or so. It got so bad that by 2019, that was the driver for this whole wallaby strategy. And the first part of it was actually to get animals back to containment. And they've actually done a pretty good job, but it hasn't been finished. So we still have wallabies outside containment. We still have wallabies in North Otago. We have a section of North Otago is a bit misleading because the boundary for Otago and Canterbury is actually not very clear cut. You've got a piece basically Duntroon through to the Hawktons is actually, and over to Amarama is actually South Canterbury still. So the Otago part is only really from Duntroon towards the sea and the Mount Piscal and the Kakanui catchment. So there's a whole area of South Canterbury there we don't have a lot of recent information about because we've only been talking with Otago. But there's a gap there in our knowledge as to what's happening in like around Otamatata, Rugged Ridges Station, Otamatapaio, Amarama Station, and they are doing controlling there. But I'd imagine when you see all those dots on the map, there's probably the similar number of dots in the South Canterbury stuff in there as well, indicating how much, there's quite a few wallaby that's still in existence in that area. So there's still wallaby outside of containment. We know there's wallaby around the little Mount Ida that haven't been got yet. That's been seen on the trail cameras. We're very concerned about the options with the new strategy. The first option is to sort of continue doing what we're doing, which is sort of what we agree with. But we would also like to see the core suppressed as well. We don't want to see what the current, we still want to see the outliers and the range extent dealt with in the buffer areas, but we'd also like to see some suppression in the core. The first option doesn't actually do that. It's just a little bit of continuing what we're doing, which is good for us, but the core does, we're pretty much our team of three of the opinion the core does need to be also suppressed as well to help with the work that's been done on the outsides. But the other two, the 2, 3 and 4 option all talk about breeding populations of wallaby, and that's where the issue is because we can't determine what is a breeding population and what is not. And an example of that at that Kakanui area, that hasn't been surveyed for quite some time. There's a lot of country in there. They're only going to go into there recently, like this year. So there's gaps in our knowledge with what is actually still on the wrong side of the river.
So how much budget have we put in towards us?
Our council has not contributed at all.
We're not.
No,
Not even in type.
No, that's another discussion for another day. It has been brought up that we should have skin in the game, but that would have to be a different discussion on a different format. What we want to do is submit to Biosecurity New Zealand, which is the agency that runs the program under MPI, that we are concerned that any drop-off in work basically in the North Otago area, we're very concerned about it. We don't want to see those outliers sort of dismissed as just, you're, a wandering male or something like that. We want them to be investigated. We want them to be eradicated. We understand there's gaps in the knowledge as well, so they can't tell us conclusively that there's no breeding populations. In fact, there probably are breeding populations there. It's just the technology that we have for finding them is not there at this time. If you've ever been through that country, it's big.
Yeah.
So, yep.
I was going to ask if we are advocating for increased effort in Otago, who's signing the check then? If it's not us contributing, but we want them to work harder.
It's a national program, and
Yeah.
we've got set funding. The first 4 years were 28 million, and there's 7 million for this year. They may have actually got a bit more in Canterbury as well, so it might be a bit more. We're advocating for more funding. We're advocating for a continuation of the work, not a decrease of the work, and we want more done for what we can.
Right. And did I take from your comments that it's uncertain how they would target a breeding population if that was the strategy? I mean, I'm assuming there's not the equivalent of a Tupperware party for wallabies that would attract a female of the species to the.
Yeah. The thing is, wallabies are hard to detect. They really are. And if you've got a sighting here, this is how it all happened. Oh, someone saw a wallaby over there. Oh, no, go and have a look, couldn't find it. And then a year went by, another year, there were 2 wallaby over that side there. That's how it starts.
Yeah.
And then by 2019, everyone was screaming out, what the hell's happened? There's wallabies everywhere. They've gone down, they're breaking the containment boundaries. They're now on Otago. We've got breeding populations. You can't have that attitude. You've got to have the attitude that if you've got wallaby on the wrong place, you've got to go and find them and try and deal with them. And we can't, just because a wallaby's seen, you have no idea what that is, what that indicates. It could be quite a substantial breeding population in that area. The ground is vast. So, yeah, we definitely don't want them to step away from the range edge, which is not defined, by the way. We can't define it conclusively to the south, to the west, and to the north. So we're really concerned that any sort of assumptions being made about what is where, and that we're just going to go take all the money and put it over here and just forget about this for the time being. We're concerned about that for Southland. Yeah. So,
A couple of things. Stupid wallabies. No, they're not stupid, that's the trouble. Yes, advocating for a strong eradication approach. Yes, happy with the direction. Thing that I'm wondering whether it's missing or not, I don't know whether it's within the scope of this, is advocating for further funding for data gathering, because you've said several times that you just don't know. We haven't got the data to, so is there room within this submission to advocate for something like that?
Within the strategy, it does acknowledge that as part of it is innovation and technology for detection. So there is scope in the current strategy and the new strategy for innovation and detection techniques.
Right.
So we didn't really go into that in our submission. We were more concerned. Well, we did. We've acknowledged that there's gaps in the technology enabling that, and that we need to keep building on that. I take your point. It is in there. We have actually mentioned that there is.
So it strongly is my.
Yeah, it could be potentially made stronger at that point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you can't do what you need to do.
Yeah. It was a key point that Gavin Newdy from ORC raised to us, was that he went into quite some detail about the technologies available and that there's gaps in the ability to find these wallabies because of the.
Is the technology available that we just haven't got money to use, or do we need to research?
It's research basically. So there's been a lot of research done with aerial thermal technology, both cooled and uncooled, and also with drone thermal technology, and also detection dogs. And at this stage, still the best are the drone thermals alongside the detection dogs. The dogs are just as good as the drone, but the aircraft cooled and uncooled thermal didn't really give us the results that we wanted. And then looking at the dog side of it and the drone stuff, it's limited in its scope. Like you can't, like the area is vast. Yeah, so you need a hell of a lot of it to cover such a massive area. When you're talking millions of hectares.
Yeah. And the other point, I guess, is for number 2, and Jeremy referred to it, this is wilding pines in reverse, spatially, but also the same, pull the funding and all of a sudden you've got a much bigger problem. So So, you know, if there's space to reference that in your submission as well.
Well, we've already seen that with your history, haven't we?
Yeah,
They stopped.
So-
and we
Yeah.
bought.
they did.
How much have you now had to spend on wilding pine?
Just in regards, what do I target? Do you know what that's in?
They again, they get money from MPI.
Yeah.
But they
your own
actually,
rate,
I
money
think
into
they
it.
do, and I can't answer that question.
Interesting, I'd like to find out that. Because
Especially seeing as they're on
there's
our
a
pest
point-
management plan.
I'd rather be finding that their border on the north side than our border. You know, if it's a bit like this, they're coming. And it just doesn't make sense to wait till they come.
But like the Polish encouraging the Ukrainians to fight harder against the Russians.
Yeah.
It's going further.
Don't realise if you don't help
That's
us,
the right.
you're gonna be dead. And it says a wee bit that, and that's what we've been taught, you know, we've had one meeting or a couple, but, and that's a Canterbury thing too. We just live in an island.
Mm.
So, you know, it's a South Island issue.
Yeah.
Like one of a few of these things, I should say, because they don't stop at the border and ask to come in. Just going back to that map where you found dead ones, are some of these ones, are they confirmed that, hey, they've died there, or are these the young bogans coming back? All bogans that have been out up and bringing dead ones back. I'm looking, there's 2 dogs actually right beside our farm on the not because of my son. But I'm just
You're correct. They
there's
were,
Blue Mountains on this.
yeah, they were shot wallabies
They were shot
by contractors
in there.
there at those locations.
That is only 20 or 30 k's away from there.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep, over by Belvedere and over by the Waikiwi.
Yeah, so they're actually, and
They're
they were
not-
shot.
Yeah, yep.
They're
yep,
actually bouncing
yep,
around
right,
there.
You shot one of those. Yeah, the Belvedere one.
So they could be in the Blue Mountains in greater numbers.
Yeah.
There was one shot there. Look, I don't think they are in the Blue Mountains. Could be, but there's certainly one was shot on the other side of the river from the Rankleburn. So not on this side. But the one is
there.
Yeah.
It's a farm that we blacked off there.
Yeah. And there's the red one below.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one there.
Is that
Yeah, Joe Hughes shot that one.
So
So
more or less here.
to be,
As such.
I'll be fair about that it's actually not showing all of the wallabies that have been shot. There's gaps in that data there. I noticed. There's been 6 wallabies shot already this year as well.
So how many is that? That looks like about maybe 90 or 100.
There's actually close to over 100 that have been shot since about 2016. So some of them aren't included on, they're not on that map.
So they
It's
always,
probably because they weren't GPS started, but they were just.
Oh, I see. It's just,
Oh,
you
got
don't
some
know where they were.
so these animals bounce across come across the bridges. That was always the thing, we don't want them to come across.
Yeah, well, actually, how they spread, like when it was really bad, the strategy kicked off in 2019. We were seeing wallabies squashed on Lake Benmore Dam, Lake Avonmore Dam on the actual road there.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was in 2019. I saw those wallabies myself.
Yeah.
And then the spread into Mackenzie Basin's the other real hotspot too. So it swings right round and up to the north.
Because you're getting, you know, you're only one, sorry, I'm just, even where you see where Glen Area is there, the big.
Yep.
Up the top, she's open country, so they're
They would love that country.
Yeah.
And they'll be there in the tens of
I was
thousands.
gonna ask, what's the optimum habitat for them? Is it?
Glen
Yeah.
Area Station.
Like the hill country there.
I love that hill country, particularly if there's plenty of cover for them to hide in, but access to good grassland. And Glen Area has plenty of great.
A mixture of grasslands and a bit of trees to hide in.
Yeah.
And the point is that it gets more and more expensive as elimination proceeds. So I'm
Exactly.
assuming the last wallaby will be the most expensive wallaby to
Yeah,
kill.
we should be seeing a hell of a lot of money spent for zero.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we still have meetings that we go to where people complain about the cost per wallaby. They don't see it as success.
No.
You know, and the trend is that at the moment in North Otago, the kills are going down and the costs are going up. And then you got
Commitment is
Yeah,
being
so-
challenged.
When I was last speaking to Gav Beauty, he went to a meeting in Kurau, one of the cockies there said, we spent 40 grand getting that wallaby up the back. What do you say?
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, I know. And he saw that as a negative. And I was saying, well, what do you want to do? We'll take 1,000 wallaby up there and then bring the cost per wallaby down for you. Is that what you want? So, yeah.
Can you just clarify, are we seeing wallabies on the west or south of the Clutha? Is that what that map is perhaps?
No, we're not.
We're not, but
Oh,
they are
sorry,
in the Clutha.
sorry,
Yes,
we
we
have.
are.
They
They are on the
They
side
are.
of the Clutha,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was one.
That's what I'm paying on.
So what
They
effort do we
dropped
put into sort of surveillance monitoring, I guess? And I'm thinking, you know, through that umbrella of
Oh,
Woolman,
that sort of
Garvey,
stuff.
Mountain Range.
Basically, we're dependent on locals reporting them.
Right.
We just don't.
Landowner report.
We've got 3 in our biosecurity animal team.
Mm.
We wouldn't be able to even put a dent in surveillance of any type. So we're dependent on landowners coming to us with sightings, and we have been pretty good at getting the word out there. One of the concerning sightings that we had not long ago was on Brentsalls, which is right on our border, up in the Pomahaka, and he saw a wallaby there, and we spent a bit of, well, Otago went and put a contractor in and spent some time. That's only 6K from the Southland border.
Yeah, that's just above where I was
Yeah.
pointing.
They taste all right, can we not, you know, encourage an industry from that?
I think they tried that.
Use coyote to.
There's another, there's a couple of us, well, we can sort out the submission. I don't think we need to go hard, whatever you feel.
Yeah.
Probably agree with your positions, but it's actually a serious, I never knew they were that close. I've never been told that they were that close to the border.
Yep.
I didn't even know they were across our cliff. We always talked about the few of them, one that was floating around, talked about the ones that the hunters dropped off, a dead one.
Yep.
As they went back home. That's the first time I've been here 10 years that I've said we shot one in the Clutha.
Yep.
So I know, like from a point of us sitting around here going, I've never been told we need funding or we need to be working with Otago series.
Yep.
How does this money work? Because I'm sitting there going, geez, the old horse is bolted already. I was still thinking, oh, the Otago is holding them off, but no, that's not the point. So I'm concerned looking at that, especially we bouncing down my road. So, but it just says I thought they were.
Yep.
It wasn't it was Canterbury Otago's problem.
Yep.
And so
Well, look, I'll be fair, they've been, as we've pointed out, they've been very successful since 2019.
Yeah.
They've only had 4 years on the strategy, from 22 to this year. And they've done a hell of a lot of great work, but we need it to continue. We don't want to change the direction. We want to, particularly for Southland, we need the investment to continue in North Otago so that we don't.
What's the impetus for the change in the strategy then? Is it just?
There's a lot of pressure from farmers in the core area that haven't received any control, and they want the control, but unfortunately we've only got 7 million on the national program.
So they're trying to limit the spread rather than deal to.
Well, 3 wallabies to a stock unit for a Bennett, and some of those properties on the Hunters Hills have got thousands of wallabies on them.
yeah.
They're getting a 90% or 95% subsidy on that control work, because they do actually have to put a wee bit of skin in the game.
Yeah.
And when you go to, like, I've just been on Waitangi station, they're like, why would you not? Well, this is just fantastic for us. You know, it's getting things under control for us. We've got more stock on the hill, the pastures are better, and we're doing a lot more. We can get a lot more gain for what we do.
Economic gains.
Yeah, and then so there's this jealousy thing where some others are going, well, they got that, we want that too, but the money's been spent in the buffer and it's been spent on containing wallabies that have gone out.
So the strategy itself wasn't necessarily broken, it's the implementation of the strategy that's the problem.
They want, there's not enough money to go around. And
But also that. Yeah.
So for us, we want the option one is what we would like, continuation of virtually what we're doing. But Caitlin, myself and Dave are very much of the opinion that we would like to see wallabies suppressed across the entire range concurrently as the work is done from the outside in, progressive containment. We think that's the best and the logical way to manage them, but that's going to require some additional funding for that to happen. But we've just got to make sure that we give feedback. It's by the 30th of this month to acknowledge that we want wallabies controlled and eradicated from Otago.
That would be our
Anybody's disagreeing with you?
No. No, I think it's good.
Oh, well, you
Yeah.
disagreed with
No,
them. Eradicate from my
No,
time.
Yes, to go.
Industry, you know,
Just got-
but it is for us, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if we get to that point, can we guarantee that they are investments, if we did invest, we wouldn't stop and say, there's possibility of controlling and eradication, I don't know, if it would be, but
We've also got the pest management plan coming up for review, so we're gonna have to think about
yeah,
patients for that as well.
that's, excuse me.
Oh, what? Very good, running.
Thanks.
No,
Thanks for that pressing news.
That's pretty good.
Don't have one though. Seen what they do to the cars at Bathurst?
Yeah. All right.
Mind you, those
These
cars are
bits
driving
of-
faster than I am.
No, good, no, good things.
that's all good. Jim,
Yeah, very good, thank you. for the quick-
Thanks.
had a case study that shows we don't need 12 councillors.